Hey everyone, my name is Poisonblade and welcome to Valhalla, where today we are building a swamp for a lovely lady that of course isn't foreboding your death if you ever come across her, but also don't start playing in the swamp because some of those logs that you see drifting in the water, well, they have teeth. Because it is a saltwater crocodile habitat, because of course it is, it's a swamp, of course there are crocodiles. But with that being said, let's get straight into today's video. So I have to preface this video by saying that it is so far the darkest video that I've made, because there is going to be a scene that shows suicide by hanging, and it's kind of all throughout this video. It's the main theme of today's build, so if you're uncomfortable with that, I would say to skip today's video, because as I said, it's kind of all over today's video. And usually I don't really show like the dark things like so obviously. Yeah, today I do. There's not like a body hanging or something, it's just a noose, but again, if you're uncomfortable with that, I would say to skip today's video because it's the main theme of the build. And well, with that being said, I of course have to somewhat explain why I built that scene. But that lovely lady that I mentioned in the intro is of course referencing a Banshee, because I mean, she was eventually going to be here. I think I already mentioned in previous videos that I wanted to make something involving a Banshee, and usually, from what I've read and heard, Banshees are sort of like women that died through tragic means or some kind of trauma. So yeah, that's why I wanted to make a really dark scene that just is really obvious, and then you have like the Banshee a few feet away. Well, I don't see the Banshee. I mean, if you see the Banshee anywhere in this video, then yeah, you're not happy. I didn't build a Banshee, I didn't try that. If you see a Banshee, you're imagining it, or good luck, bye casket. No. But yeah, of course, I did start with building a swamp, because originally I wanted Baba Yaga to be in the swamp, but Baba Yaga's stories always place her in like a very dense forest. So kinda didn't work to have Baba Yaga in the swamp, and then I thought, oh wait, I can build something for a Banshee, and Banshee on herself isn't actually that scary, but if you place her in like a scary location, then it's just like, she basically then amplifies the creepiness of the location. And a swamp is always somewhat creepy, like no matter where you are, unless it's like a swamp with all flowers and such, which this one of course isn't. I mean, again, there's that very dark scene. I have to say this again, but if you're not comfortable with scenes showcasing, well, suicide by hanging, this video is going to get demonetized so quickly just because of that one S word. But if you're uncomfortable with that, please do skip today's video. I mean, next video is still going to be Valhalla. I did say in the previous video with the asylum that this Sunday I was going to finish the asylum, but I basically have so much work to do this week that I won't be able to do that properly. So this Sunday's video is going to be a little bit smaller and a little bit probably goofy. So we're still going to stick in Valhalla for the rest of this week. And also this Friday, possibly there might be a video, like a very short video, giving kind of an update on Khan al-Bashar, because I don't want to spoil anything for that video, but it's like a 5-minute video. But yeah, I just want to update you guys so that you guys know that Khan al-Bashar isn't dead. It's just behind the scenes work. But anyway, so yeah, that's going to happen this week. So Sunday we're still in Valhalla, and then Friday possibly an update on Khan al-Bashar. And then well, this is a little bit too late for anyone watching this video, but I also should probably be streaming Tuesday. Well, actually today is Tuesday for me, but for you guys, when you're watching this, it's Wednesday, so it's kind of a little bit too late, but yeah. So, busy week. What was I talking about beforehand? Oh yeah, the swamp. So, when it comes to the swamp, I had to look throughout Valhalla for a suitable place because I wanted to have it a little bit realistically, like just the slightest bit of realism when it comes to the placement of like certain areas, because I didn't want to place a swamp right next to the river or right next to a town, even though this is going to have a small village eventually. Not in today's video, but I plan to build a small village really close to it. A lot smaller than Vindhal, like 3 or 4 buildings at most. But this build, or the swamp, is basically, if you take into consideration all the previous builds, it's like across the map. It's really on the other side of Valhalla, because a swamp is usually located in a place where water can't really drain away to like a river or to the sea easily, so the water just stagnates there. And the only place, well, there were actually 2 places in Valhalla that could be suitable for that. Both of them were between mountains. Like this one is right next to a mountain, but it's kind of in yeah, easiest way to describe it is just 2 mountains on the side, 1 in the back, and then the front is hilly, so there's not really that, like, this place is where water would get trapped and then eventually would form a swamp. And then I used a lot of those Australian grass things. Like, you have the colored version of this, which I used to mimic grain and such, but the, well, that version can easily go into a swamp. The crocodiles hate it probably because it's, well, it's not really supposed to be a swamp plant. It's supposed to be like on the plains. But I just really like the look of these like, well, brown sort of reed-like plants and just dot them all across the swamp. And I did actually also make some kind of floating islands, where basically the idea is that there was like maybe that a tree fell into the water or just some kind of solid thing, and then plants slowly grew on top of that. The tree or whatever solid thing decomposed entirely, and then now you just have like those plants floating in the water. So yeah, don't get lost in this swamp, because some of the islands are islands and you can stand on them. Some are just plants floating in the water and then you go down. And some of those logs, as I said, have teeth. And now we're going to start on the gruesome dark scene. So again, if you're uncomfortable with this, please do skip today's video, because, well, you can skip now, because now the dark stuff starts happening. But yeah, so the swamp, somewhat realistic in its placement. Plants, maybe not precisely, but here it was a little bit of like, alright, this might not be realistic, but it looks better. And that's usually a thing in Planet Zoo. It's like a sort of like, alright, this is slightly realistic. I mean, for Valhalla, Guyana Bashar, it's like realism is calm. Isla Pacifica is though really realistic. And then Valhalla is kind of the middle ground, but it's usually like, when it comes to like building things surrounding like myths, legends, and just somewhat attempting realism, it's always like this sort of in between of like what looks good and what portrays it accurately. Sometimes I just go for like what looks good and not what's accurately. And yeah, I have to touch on the darker scene. There's not going to be a body hanging there, but I do build a body back, because I really wanted to have the sort of vibe that something happened here which caused the Banshee, or which created the Banshee, and usually it's like a traumatic death. And I did first want to make like a story, but I thought it would even, well, would be more fun to leave the story completely open, to not show any of like, oh, this is why she hanged herself, or this is why she is dead, or this is her story. I'm basically letting that all open so that you guys can decide on that. But yeah, I did steal the skulls from Baba Yaga's hut, because hey, if you have built it and it works, I usually use it constantly. I mean, you could see throughout this video, I do a little bit of rock work like on site, but by now I usually just go to existing rockwork, copy the rocks and place them in a way that it blends in, so I basically copy a lot of stuff. I also made like a, well, very shallow grave, as if she was somewhat cut down, or at least she was somewhat buried, but then I thought, to make this more creepier, I could just have the grave open and her body is gone. Well, not gone, it's on a nearby island, but how did she get there? Like, bodies don't usually start just walking around, and the Banshee is not like a zombie creature or anything. Like, she doesn't... Well, she could be a physical thing or physical being, but she's usually not like the zombie thing. Also, her scream, like... Banshees are not violent beings or spirits or fairies. Like, yeah, she could be a fairy, she could be a spirit, she could be in between both of those. It's not really clear from what I've read, but she is really heavily tied to like the spiritual, because she is, well, she of course does forebode your death if you see her. So she's not supposed to be violent, she's basically actually, well, she is a little bit how do you say it, elitist or something, but basically in Irish legends, only like royalty or like the higher ups would have a Banshee, because Banshees are associated usually with a family. They're not just randomly walking around, they're usually associated with a family. Usually with a family that, at least in the past, maybe even to this day, are like considered like nobility and such, because there's a sort of backstory that is somewhat created from, well, rich families back in those days could hire someone to mourn the dead, and of course the peasants couldn't afford that. I mean, of course not. You guys probably wouldn't be able to afford a Banshee. That sounds really weird, but she's basically some, well, say that she transformed from like the wailing woman that you, or women that you could, well, hire to mourn at a funeral or do like a very like mourn thing, ceremony thing. And then slowly like the legends started to grow from that, so that they did have like a real origin, or like a real life origin. And that means that a lot of like noble families, even though maybe some of them aren't noble anymore today, because England, but basically Banshees only like rich people. So yeah, I don't have a Banshee. You probably also don't have a Banshee. I mean, yeah, I probably don't have any Irish heritage, and even if so, it's like maybe like 1.5 or like no, not even 1. Like, it's probably 0% Irish. But yeah, Banshees like rich people. So yeah, I mean, I understand why nowadays it's like her screams are her weapons, and yeah, her screaming and wailing and crying, like, yeah, that could be terrifying, but there's another aspect about the Banshee that I actually find more terrifying. Because yes, he can wail, yes, he can scream, yes, he can cry, but what I think is her most creepy aspect is clapping. Like, not just like screaming and then clapping, it's just clapping. And I mean, the crying, the wailing and such, that can be somewhat made with nature. Like if the wind goes through certain plants and such, it can sound like wailing. Clapping is usually not a sound that nature makes, so there's no excuse if you hear like someone clapping behind you. Yeah, most likely it's either a Banshee, or there's just a crazy person behind you, and humanity is always, for me, more scary than spirits, demons, or otherworldly beings, because, yeah, spirits usually don't have guns or knives. Some crazy people do have that, and that's scarier. Also, I mean, maybe you guys now see a Banshee being built. I don't. I just see myself building the rest of the swamp. If you see a Banshee being built, yeah. How many is a casket? Also, just really quick reel. She does look a little bit like a puppet from It's a Small World. You know, ignore that because building small things in Planet Zoo is kind of impossible when it comes to statues because they look kind of chunky and such. But yeah, I don't see a Banshee being built. Maybe you guys see that, but I just see the continuation of a swamp being built. Yeah, but that's actually going to be most of it for today, so yeah, the creepiest thing surrounding this entire build is probably that the Banshee looks like it's from It's a Small World, and now I have that tune in my head, so that's probably the creepiest thing. So, major thing here is just playing with lights. But again, just a quick update on what's going to happen the rest of this week. Maybe an update on Ken Abishad on Friday. And then another build in Valhalla that's a little bit more happy and goofy than today's video, because today's video got dark with the suicide scene. And yeah, you guys go wild with imagining a story for why she killed herself and why she continues to haunt this place. Even though Banshees can also be fairies, and that means that they basically just exist and aren't created or not created in that way. Yeah, Banshees can be quite a lot of things from what I read. Yeah, they're just, well, the most main thing about them is that they are foreboding someone's death, or they prophesize someone's death. Well, not prophesize, but you know, just seeing her, you're usually going to die. So yeah, buy your caskets. But anyway, that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, it's probably the darkest video that I've made so far, but I really like how it turned out. I really like the swamp because, well, I just like creepy places. I like stories where there's a dark tone to it. But anyway, again, hope you enjoyed today's video. If you enjoyed it, there's of course the like button. If you really enjoyed it and want to see more, there's the subscribe button, and there's a bell that suspiciously has started working. I'm not blaming the Banshee for that or saying the Banshee did it, but it creepily started working when the Halloween build started coming out. So, hope you enjoyed it, and I wish all of you an amazing day. Bye bye!
Ha 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 ha!